The town had always prided itself on the image it displayed to outsiders, a carefully polished surface that hid the cracks running beneath. Every family carried secrets, every leader carried sins, and every street corner whispered of stories no one dared to tell aloud. Yet the people learned to live with these shadows, covering them with laughter, polished words, and rituals of respectability. They built reputations like fortresses, so high and impenetrable that anyone who questioned them was either silenced or driven away. But beneath this surface, guilt was festering, shame was growing, and hypocrisy had become the unspoken foundation on which everything else stood. It only took a single spark, a moment of truth, to expose it all. When the chosen one appeared, they did not need to shout or accuse. Their very existence reflected the falseness of the town's carefully arranged mask. Eyes turned toward them, and in that gaze the people saw themselves more clearly than ever before. It wasn't just embarrassment at being caught. It was the recognition that every mask they had worn for years was crumbling under the weight of undeniable truth. Mothers who once judged others now felt the sting of their own hidden mistakes. Fathers who strutted with pride found their dishonor glaring back at them. Leaders who stood on platforms of morality could no longer hide the selfishness that guided their choices. The entire community stood as though stripped bare, as though every whispered lie had suddenly been shouted in the town square. The shame was not quiet, not private, but collective, as if the air itself pressed down on them with the weight of everything they had refused to admit. The chosen one's presence acted like a mirror no one could look away from. The gossip that had once kept them entertained now turned into confession. The laughter that had once covered their insecurities now sounded hollow. The pride that once gave them a sense of superiority now became a curse that highlighted their downfall. They were embarrassed not only by what others might think, but by finally seeing themselves as they truly were. The town that had built itself on facades was suddenly drowning in the truth of its own hypocrisy. Every street corner echoing with the unspoken knowledge that their collective sins had finally caught up to them. The chosen one's arrival was not marked by grand gestures or thunderous declarations, yet their presence carried a weight that unsettled the entire community. People who once walked with heads held high found themselves avoiding eye contact, as though the chosen one's gaze could pierce through the layers of lies and self-deception they had wrapped around themselves. What made it so powerful was that nothing needed to be said. The chosen one did not point fingers or accuse anyone directly, but their very existence seemed to demand truth. Every step they took through the town echoed like a challenge, a silent reminder of everything the townspeople had buried. Suddenly, the little betrayals they had justified in the past, the deals made in secret, the injustices they had turned a blind eye to, all rose to the surface. No amount of gossip or distraction could erase the heaviness that settled in the air. People who had once been celebrated for their reputations now felt the sting of exposure, because the chosen one represented a standard they could not manipulate. Their characters stood in stark contrast to the hollow appearances around them, and that contrast was unbearable. The townspeople felt as if they were standing in front of a blazing light, unable to hide their blemishes, unable to retreat into the safety of shadows. They began to realize that all the times they had pointed fingers at others, they were only projecting what lived inside of them. The chosen one's presence dismantled their defense mechanisms one by one, leaving them no place to hide. Friends questioned each other, families turned inward, and the entire town was forced to acknowledge the rot beneath their polished surfaces. Betrayals that had been conveniently forgotten resurfaced in their minds. Lies they told years ago replayed in their hearts, and every cruel word they had spoken now seemed to ring louder than before. The chosen one did not come to accuse, but to reveal, and in doing so they forced everyone to confront themselves. For the first time, the townspeople were no longer able to comfort themselves with comparisons, because standing in the presence of someone authentic, someone whose very being exposed their falsehoods, made all excuses dissolve. The chosen one became a living reminder that truth cannot be buried forever, and that no matter how carefully lies are constructed, there will always come a moment when they collapse. The community that once took pride in its ability to cover flaws was now suffocating in the weight of exposure, unable to escape the reflection staring back at them through the chosen one's quiet strength. The downfall of the prideful leaders did not happen in a single dramatic collapse, but in a series of small cracks that grew wider with every passing moment. At first, they tried to maintain their authority, standing tall and speaking loudly, as if volume could disguise the trembling in their voices. Yet the people who once applauded them began to look away, unsettled by the hollow words that no longer carried weight. These leaders had built their influence on intimidation, fear, and the illusion of moral superiority. But when the chosen one walked among them, all those tools lost their power. The more they tried to hide their failures, the clearer those failures became. The community started whispering about the secrets that had been ignored for too long. Questions that had been forbidden to ask were now spoken openly. The masks of respectability these leaders wore began to slip, revealing selfishness, dishonesty, and greed. Their pride, once a weapon that kept others in line, now became the very thing that dragged them into disgrace. As people saw the truth, they no longer felt compelled to obey. The chosen one's quiet strength revealed that real authority does not come from control, but from authenticity. And the people were awakening to that truth. Families that had once feared punishment for speaking out now found courage. Individuals who had long remained silent discovered their voices. The leaders who had strutted with confidence began to stumble, realizing that the power they clung to was slipping through their fingers. It was not rebellion that tore them down, but exposure. The undeniable contrast between their empty pride and the chosen one's undeniable presence. The chosen one did not need to fight them or demand their fall. The leaders collapsed under the weight of their own falsehoods. Their downfall marked more than the end of corrupt authority. It signaled a turning point for the entire town. The fear that once ruled the community began to dissolve, replaced with a growing hunger for truth and justice. People who had been divided by manipulation now found unity in shared understanding. The Chosen One's presence was not simply a mirror, but a catalyst, awakening in others the strength they had forgotten they carried. As the leaders fell, the balance shifted, and the power that had once been concentrated in the hands of the arrogant was redistributed among those who chose honesty and humility. It was the beginning of a transformation that no one could have predicted, a shift that would change the way the town lived, thought, and believed. The Chosen One had become the symbol of what could no longer be denied, and the downfall of the leaders was the beginning of a new chapter. From the ashes of pride and deceit rose the possibility of a community no longer bound by shame, but instead ready to walk in truth when all is said and done. What unfolded in this story was not just about a town facing its shame, or leaders falling from the pedestals they built for themselves, but about the undeniable truth that no mask can last forever. The Chosen One's presence reminded everyone that lies cannot outlive the light, and that no amount of pride, status, or appearances can silence the voice of authenticity. The embarrassment and shame that swept through the community was not meant to destroy them, but to awaken them, to force open their eyes and hearts to the reality they had long ignored. From hypocrisy exposed, to power shifted, to freedom finally discovered, the journey was a necessary breaking that made way for healing. It showed that the Chosen Ones are never placed among us by accident. They carry a purpose greater than themselves, a mission to call forth truth even when it unsettles the comfortable. And with that, I want to thank you deeply for listening, reflecting, and sharing this moment with me. Your presence means more than you know, because every word shared here finds life in the hearts willing to receive it. Stay strong, stay awake, and remember, what was meant to break you is often what makes you. Pal, until we meet again, take care of yourselves, walk boldly in truth, and may peace always guide your path. Goodbye, and thank you.